Remco Evenepoel has started the season just the way he likes it, crushing monsters like Mark Hirschi or Isaac Del Toro in his favourite European country for early season starts, the Portuguese doping paradise. A place where they even build him statues as gigantic as his ego and as large as his paychecks for all those lies about how rich Pizza Hut's garbage pizzas are. However, this brilliant start to the Belgian Champions campaign has been somewhat tarnished by the opinion of doper, bully and Zoolander's friend, Lance Armstrong. Although we, on this humble channel, have already laid out the reasons why Remco may be a contender to win the 2024 Tour de France, Lance seems to think quite the opposite. And unlike his cheating but loyal workmates George Hincapie and Johann Bruyneel, Armstrong thinks that the two-time winner of Liège-Bastogne-Liège has no chance of finishing in the top 30 in his first Tour de France. He thinks Remco is incapable of climbing the toughest mountains with the best climbers. Perhaps he's recalling his own performances when, before losing an egg, that burly Motorola rider had to be content with winning some transition stages in the Grand Boucle and finishing in the top 40 in the general classification. Like Lance, Remco has also achieved his first big results outside the Tour, winning the World Road Championships and major one-day classics. However, Evenepoel has already won a Grand Tour, the Vuelta a España 2022, and also the World Time Trial Championship, where he is undoubtedly one of the best specialists on the planet. Why then doesn't Lance give the Belgian, who sleeps soundly every night in a hyperbaric chamber, an earthly chance? The answer is simple, and, in one word, hatred. But it's more than hatred, it's that competitive streak. If there was one good thing about that dirty US postal competitor, it's that he was a real animal once he got on the bike, with the best treatments from Dr. Michele Ferrari. And it seems that in that aspect, the Belgian kid also has a fighting ability that makes him go on to win despite suffering hard crashes like the one in Lombardy, in which he was caught with interesting substances in his pockets. He just gets back on the bike and he fights with the best, something his sports director at Soudal, Klaas Ludwig, knows all too well. For him, possibly making the best comparison he will ever make in his life, Remco Evenepoel is a little Lance Armstrong. He thinks that in addition to being a doped-up man, that Remco is a killer on the bike, a bully capable of stepping on others in order to achieve his great successes. But unlike Lance, Remco is loved by the fans. In many competitions, it's common to see dozens of Remco posters held aloft by 50-somethings who think they're watching Jesus Christ himself pedaling like there's no tomorrow to bring happiness to their sad lives, and all the while drinking their delicious Chimay beers. Those same fans are the ones that Lance has lost. The ones who insult the 7-time winner of no Grand Tour and the ones who banned his presence at the 2018 Tour of Flanders after a horrible, threatening letter from the felon David Lepation, president of the UCI, and at the same time a giant fan of Remco Evenepoel. But it's not only envy that Armstrong has towards Remco Evenepoel. Fans have other pedalists of dubious character like Mathieu van der Poel or Jonas Vingegaard. But why then is there so much tyranny towards the guy who earns millions making absurd documentaries like Lance himself did for Nike? We have to travel 30 years back in time to understand the situation. Specifically to 1995, when Lance Armstrong was already the leader and absolute star of the Motorola team. After winning the World Championships in 1993 against riders like Miguel Indurain, Johann Museo or Bjarne Riis, Armstrong was still growing in the ranks of the Gringo team, but he lacked the ultimate bit of magic to beat real monsters like Moreno Argentine, Yevgeny Berzin or Tony Rominger in the big races of the calendar. And it was then that a young Belgian rider with whom he had already trained just weeks before becoming world champion in Oslo signed for Team Telefonica. We're talking, of course, about Axel Merckx, the giant son of the, for many, best cyclist in history and one of the greatest dopers in history, Eddy Merckx. Lance already had a killer mentality by then, and from Axel's own mouth, he knew that Daddy Merckx knew none other, no more and no less than the miracle doctor Michele Ferrari. The genius from Ferrara had blown the Gewiss Ballant team away over the previous 2 seasons, and Armstrong knew that he had to turn to him to become a super champion. Lance asked Eddy through his son Axel to introduce him to the good doctor, and so he began his journey to becoming a monster of biblical proportions. In short, if Lance Armstrong won 7 tours for nothing, if he won millions and millions of dollars and was able to sleep with Sheryl Crow and an Olsen twin, it was all thanks, no more and no less, to the grace of Axel and Eddy Merckx. But what do these 2 former cyclists have to do with Remco Evenepoel? Well, their animosity towards Remco is well known. When the former footballer refused to compete with the Axiom team, led by Axel Merckx, after he'd signed up to do so when he was a junior in cycling, well, that put the cat among the pigeons. He didn't do it because Patrick Lefevere was much quicker to offer him a lucrative ticket to make his pro debut at the age of 19. But from then on, the cannibal Merckx didn't stop constantly beating up on Remco in every competition in which the little Belgian didn't perform at the highest expected level. Lance never forgets, and although he will never forgive the stoner Floyd Landis, he will always defend the interests of the Merckx family wherever he goes. And just as he must not like the fact that his arch-enemy, Alberto Contador, is always applauding every time Remco Evenepoel gets on a bike in any competition, well, that must hurt too. Remco always claimed that he noticed the Pistolero long before he noticed Lance, and that, to the gringo's swollen pride, must hurt an awful lot. We shouldn't be surprised if the vegetarian Contatrol suffered strange tibia injuries. Evenepoel suddenly abandons the Giro d'Italia, but nothing has happened. Possibly the wise Alberto is waiting for his team with Berillo to move up to the World Tour category and have at least a minimal chance of enjoying Remco Evenepoel in his team. But what we do know is that Evenepoel would much rather sign for Team Polti Cometa than for Lance Armstrong's We Do team. At least his great friend Johann said something to his podcast listeners. If Lance knows anything, it's cycling. Take his word for it. There you go. We don't think Evenepoel will fail to the point of finishing behind the likes of Bob Jungels, Wout Poels or Harold Tejada. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.